The woman behind the glass window looked up at me, her expression shifting from routine boredom to mild confusion. She tapped her keyboard again, double-checked the screen, then said the words that split my world in two, "I'm sorry, there's no record of a Clara Voss." At first, I thought it was a clerical error. A glitch. Something easily explained. But as I stood there, my fingertips pressing into the cool edge of the counter, I knew better. They hadn't just disowned me. They erased me, like I was a mistake that never should have existed. It was Nathaniel. Only someone with his kind of influence could manipulate records that deep. He didn't just lock the door behind me when I left the Voss estate 7 years ago. He burned the hallway down and rebuilt it without my name on any plaque. I left the registry office numb, my boots echoing on the marble floors that reminded me too much of the Voss Dominion lobby, clean, soulless, deliberate. I glanced at the gold plaque outside, founded by Everett Voss. My father's name, still there. Still untouchable. And mine? Gone like smoke. Have you ever been cut off from something that once defined you? Like waking up and your reflection refuses to show? I walked home through Ravenshore's sleepy streets, the early autumn breeze curling at my coat sleeves. Street lights flickered. The town hadn't changed much. But I had. I'd become the kind of person who didn't get noticed. Who poured coffee for people who'd never know what my last name once meant. Back at the diner, the evening lull had set in. Jade Moreno, my coworker and the closest thing I had to a friend, glanced over from behind the counter. Her brows furrowed. "You okay?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Yeah, I lied. But inside, I was thinking about the floors again, how the Voss estate had gleamed with sterile marble, how every step there echoed. Here, grease stained the tiles and my sneakers squeaked. A quote floated up, uninvited, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." Maya Angelou. I repeated it like armor. I needed something. Anything to hold back the quiet rage that was beginning to churn again. That's when I saw him. A man in the corner booth, his face turned just enough for recognition to hit like a sucker punch. Lucien Draven. 7 years and he hadn't aged the way memory does. He was sharper now, more real, more dangerous. He watched me like he knew exactly how unprepared I was. My hands went cold. My body reacted before my brain gave permission. I walked over. He smiled, slow, deliberate, the way he used to when he knew he had the upper hand. "You're still pouring coffee," he said. "You're still stalking," I replied, but my voice caught halfway out. He slid something across the table. A white envelope. Thick. Elegant. "She invited me," he said. "Verena. Your ex-sister-in-law. Your ex-everything." I stared at the envelope. Gold-embossed lettering. The kind of paper that didn't fold. Inside, I could already see it. Names I hadn't said aloud in years. Dates. Locations. Legacies. Lucien leaned in, elbows on the table. "I need a +1. Someone who'll leave a mark." It wasn't just an offer. It was bait. And I knew it. Still, I asked, "Why me?" He gave a half shrug. Pity? Power? Curiosity? I knew better. Lucien never did anything without a motive. Would you say yes if the man who once walked away offered you a front row seat to everything that ruined you? I picked up the invitation. My fingers traced the edges like they might cut me. My brother's name. Verena's. The Glasshaven estate. I hadn't said her name aloud in years. Lucien tilted his head. Do you want to go? I didn't answer. I just smirked. A soft laugh escaped my throat. Just once. A breathless thing. Inside, something sharp was blooming. I've spent 7 years being invisible, I thought. This is my curtain call. I set the envelope down gently and met his eyes. I'll go, I said. But on one condition. His smile flickered, curious. You let me write the rules, I told him. And if I want to burn that party down with truth, you won't stop me. The diner emptied out by 11 p.m., leaving behind the scent of burnt coffee and disinfectant. I pulled off my apron, tossed it onto the hook behind the counter, and stepped out the back door into the alley. The cold bit into my collarbone. And there he was, Lucien Draven, leaning against the brick wall like he belonged to the night. His tie hung loose around his neck, cigarette glowing between 2 fingers. The smoke curled up lazily, indifferent to the tension tightening the air between us. You waited, I said, keeping my voice flat. You showed, he replied, flicking ash to the ground. Progress. I didn't step closer. I needed the space between us to stay sharp. He extended the invitation again, this time not with charm, but with gravity. You want a deal? I asked, eyes on the gold embossing. Then understand this, I don't do appearances. I do outcomes. Before he could blink, I tore the invitation in half and let the pieces drift to the ground. Lucien didn't flinch. If anything, he smiled. If I go with you, I continued, I write the rules. This isn't a date. It's a transaction. I won't be arm candy or a mute witness. I wouldn't insult you like that, he said smoothly, but I didn't buy it. Not yet. Good. Then let's go write a contract. Have you ever had to make a deal with someone who once walked away from you? How did you protect your power? His penthouse towered over downtown Ravenshore, minimalist, brutalist, and ice-cold. It was all stone and steel, like Lucien had built a castle to keep warmth out. We stood in his kitchen, sleek marble and chilled glass stretching in every direction. I pulled a pen from my coat and scrawled my terms on a notepad like I was back in a courtroom deposition. Rule 1, if I'm provoked, I reserve the right to verbally disrupt the ceremony. Rule 2, if I expose any personal or historical truths, yours, mine, or Verina's, you do not interfere. Rule 3, no physical affection. No hand-holding. No false comfort. If I touch you in public, it's for strategy, not sentiment. You're not my shield, I said. I'm the storm. Lucien read the page like it was a business merger. You're serious, he said finally. Deadly. He signed. Then he raised a glass of whiskey, poured dark and slow. To consequences, I said, and drank. He watched me like he was seeing a weapon being forged. Then he tested me. Have you seen this? He asked, picking up his tablet and tapping a video open. There she was. Verina. Smooth, immaculate, her lips painted a shade called power. Sitting under soft lights, answering questions with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. She's a distant cousin, Verina said with a sympathetic tilt of her head. Troubled. But we wish her well. I didn't blink. That's her poker face, I said. But I know her tells. Lucien set the tablet down. You're underestimating her reach. And you're underestimating what it's like to come back from ashes. He studied me then, not like a man looking at a former lover, but like a strategist evaluating a potential ally. The silence between us hummed with dangerous understanding. Power concedes nothing without a demand, I said. It never did and it never will. He almost looked impressed. Almost. I wasn't done. If you think I'll be your silent beauty queen, I said, stepping closer, think again. Lucien folded his arms, brows lifted. I need background, I said. Guest list. Alliances. Agenda items. Who's paying off who? I don't want revenge. I want leverage. You want to play the board. I want to own it. After a beat, he walked to a locked cabinet, pressed his thumb to a scanner, and retrieved a small black drive. This has everything. Voskro deal history. The skeletons, the ghosts, the money. He handed it to me. It felt heavier than its size. You just gave me a loaded gun, I said. Lucien's voice dropped an octave. Just don't point it at me. I smiled. No promises. As I turned to leave, he didn't follow. He just watched. What would you do if you had proof that could destroy the people who destroyed you? Would you use it or wait for the perfect moment? I didn't want to ruin the wedding. I wanted to redefine who had the right to stand on that altar. The scent of jasmine and hot irons lingered in the air as I stepped into the transformation suite, its white lacquered walls and chrome fixtures gleaming like a set on a sci-fi film. Everything in the studio screamed new money wrapped in old elegance. Lucien had spared no expense. I was escorted to a high-backed chair facing a mirror tall enough to reflect my past, present, and what I was pretending not to fear about the future. At first, the stylists barely looked at me. Until one of them leaned in close, whispered my name to the head stylist, and the energy in the room changed. The whispers fell silent. Gloves were adjusted. Suddenly, I was someone worth perfecting. I chose the look. Sharp jawline, straight part, hair pulled tight like armor. A suit black smoky eye, crimson lips, not to attract, but to warn. No softness. No illusions. Camilla, the stylist assigned to me, moved with confident precision until her fingers brushed the base of my neck. Then she froze. I'll be right back, she said too quickly, and disappeared behind the velvet curtain. I didn't chase. I filed it away. People don't react like that to strangers. They react like that to ghosts. Camilla returned 10 minutes later, hands trembling slightly as she clipped a section of my hair. In the mirror, I caught her stealing glances, not at my reflection, but at something she thought she'd buried. You look just like her, she murmured. I tilted my head, feigning casual interest. Like who? She blinked. An old acquaintance. From where? No answer. But I remembered. Boarding school. A sterile hallway echoing with secrets. Camilla had been a junior stylist there, brought in to prep the daughters of senators and media tycoons for galas they didn't understand yet. You were there, I said softly. The day they removed my name from the student registry. She dropped the curling iron. I was told. You'd never come back. Verena told you that? Camilla paled. She has friends in high places, she said quietly. Yeah, I replied, standing. And memories in low ones. My hair was only half done. I left it that way. There's a certain poetry in unfinished things. Lucien's car was parked along the curb, tinted windows hiding the smirk he probably wore. I slid in and slammed the door hard enough to shake the frame. Your people still think I'm a ghost, I snapped. Lucien raised a brow. Should I be impressed or concerned? You sent me there on purpose? I chose the place for their discretion, not their history. I wasn't convinced. Was it a trap or a test? He turned slightly in his seat. You're touching nerves I didn't know still existed. You'd better start knowing the names behind every mirror, I said. I'm not walking into that wedding half-blind. He reached for the glove compartment and pulled out a photograph. Faded, glossy, creased in the corners. I took it and stared. It was me. Teenage me. Bare shoulders. Nervous smile. A blue dress I didn't pick. A camera flash just off-center. I've never seen this, I said. It was taken at a gala, Lucien said. Crow family hosted it. A month before everything changed. I flipped it over. No date. No name. Just the image of a girl who had no idea the floor beneath her was about to vanish. Back in my apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at myself in the mirror. The half-finished hair. The severe makeup. I looked like someone who might survive a war. But not someone untouched by it. I pulled out my laptop. Searched the archives. Filtered by year, location, keywords. There it was, Richard Voss's daughter makes surprise debut at Crow Gala. Underneath, a single comment. She vanished not long after this. Username, Jade_M89. Jade. The only person who'd ever looked me in the eye and seen me, not just my last name. I scrolled further. Another link. Court documents. Camilla's name. She had testified in a deposition against my father. My breath left in pieces. They hadn't just erased me. They weaponized anyone who saw too much. If Camilla lied under oath, what else had they rewritten in the name of truth? The Glasshaven estate rose from the hillside like a cathedral for the privileged, columns washed in amber light, chandeliers glowing through tall windows. The music inside pulsed faintly through the glass, elegant but sharp enough to slice through the evening air. I took a breath before crossing the threshold. Lucien walked beside me, his tuxedo immaculate, his expression unreadable. I trailed a few steps behind, not from submission, but from strategy. You learn more when people forget to lower their voices in front of you. The foyer bloomed open with silk gowns and champagne laughter. Every step I took echoed across marble, loud enough to draw glances. My heels weren't fashion, they were punctuation. Each click said, I'm not supposed to be here, and that's exactly why I came. Verena stood at the top of the staircase, radiant in white. Her gown shimmered like it had been spun from someone else's illusions. Nathaniel hovered behind her, hand on the banister, pretending calm. But when her eyes found mine, the smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, like a curtain caught in a sudden gust. For that heartbeat, the string quartet faded. The chatter dulled. All that remained was the thin line of her mouth and the pulse in my throat, steady, deliberate. Have you ever entered a room where every eye turned, and you felt the world shift a few inches beneath your feet? The ballroom spread wide, gold accents and candlelight dripping off crystal. I took my seat across from the Voss table. My father's portrait hung in the corner, painted smug, immortal. Robert Voss Sr., still commanding the room even from the grave. Evelyn sat beside Nathaniel, her pearls trembling with each laugh she forced. The waiter approached. Red or white, ma'am? Red, I said, my voice steady as I raised the glass toward my brother. Nathaniel froze mid-sentence, wine glass halfway to his lips. He didn't look at me directly, but the flick of his jaw muscle told me I'd found the nerve. Inside my clutch was the gold-embossed invitation, Verena Crow and Nathaniel Voss. The very proof of the empire that had rewritten me out of existence. Lucien leaned toward me, eyes on the crowd. "You're doing well," he murmured. I let the stem of my glass rest against my fingertips. "No one will forget," I whispered back. The lights dimmed as the waltz began. Couples swept onto the dance floor, a perfect choreography of power and pretense. Verena glided through them like royalty. When she reached our table, I stood. Our eyes met, polite, poised, poisonous. "Verena," I said softly, my smile measured. "Don't you remember me?" Her hand stiffened around her clutch. The tiniest pause. Then that signature Crow composure snapped back into place. "Clara," she said evenly. "How surprising. I thought you were living somewhere simpler." "Still do," I replied. "It keeps the noise down." Her lips curved, not into a smile, but into a blade. "It must be exhausting carrying old grudges." "Oh, this isn't a grudge," I said. "It's a reminder. I remember the day you hired someone to erase me." Her pupils flicked, just once. Then a guest nearby spilled champagne, and her hand rose gracefully to steady the glass, not a drop on her dress. The orchestra played louder, masking the tension that rippled like heat between us. In the reflection above, the chandelier fractured her image into dozens of glittering shards. Each one seemed to whisper, "Liar, liar, liar." What would you do if someone smiled at you across a crowded room, but you knew their smile was a loaded sentence you hadn't finished reading? I left the ballroom before I said something that would turn the air electric. The balcony overlooked the lake, silent, still, moonlight breaking on the surface like splintered glass. Lucien followed a few paces behind, silent until he pulled his phone from his pocket. "You should see this," he said. He pressed play. A video flickered to life, grainy but clear enough. Verena at a desk, Nathaniel beside her. A fountain pen in her manicured fingers. The paper before them read, "Authorization of removal, Clara Voss." I could almost hear the scratch of the pen, the effortless cruelty behind it. "She signed it," Lucien said. "I know." "This is your moment," he added quietly. I turned to face the lake, the air cooling against my skin. "It's never been about a moment," I said. "It's about memory." He nodded once. "We move when hearts race, not when they tremble." The sounds of laughter and applause from inside bled faintly through the glass doors. I slipped the invitation back into my clutch, sealing it like a promise. When I walked back into the ballroom, the music softened again, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it, clear, sharp, impossible to mistake. Someone had picked up my discarded invitation. And they were reading my name aloud. The air in Voss Dominion's private library smelled like dust, oak polish, and wealth too old to breathe. I walked in behind Lucien, the hush of the marble floor swallowing our footsteps. The portraits along the walls followed me with painted eyes, generations of Voss men in pressed suits, daughters in pearls, all arranged like trophies on a timeline. And there, hidden near the far end, was a photograph I'd never seen on display before. Me. 16. Standing beside Robert Voss Sr., my hand barely brushed the sleeve of his tuxedo, my smile fixed by duty. It was taken the same night everything began to rot from the inside. "When did you last see this?" I asked, voice low. Lucien came up beside me. "It's been hidden," he said. The glass over the photo reflected the ceiling's amber light. My fingertips traced my younger self's outline, so naive, so polished, so disposable. They didn't just pull my name from the records, I murmured. They deleted every sign I ever belonged. The silence between us felt ceremonial. Somewhere above, the clock ticked, a sound far too loud in a room that had buried more than names. Have you ever seen a photograph of yourself at a time you weren't allowed to exist anymore? Lucien set something on the coffee table, a flash drive, small and black as a bullet. When you're ready, he said. My stomach twisted, the kind of ache that memory causes more than fear. I plugged it into my phone. The screen lit up. Verena and Nathaniel sat side by side in a private office, ink pens gleaming under chandelier light. The document before them was titled Transfer of Interests, Clara Voss. Nathaniel's signature came first. Verena's followed, with the ease of someone signing away a piece of furniture. I paused the video. My pulse didn't race. It slowed, deliberate. This isn't revenge, I said. This is re-registration of power. Lucien's gaze was steady. Are we going public? When you're ready, he replied. Knowledge doesn't scream. It settles. Heavy. Precise. The kind that rewires your bones instead of your blood. By morning, I was done being erased. The Voss Dominion boardroom smelled of disinfectant and control. 12 chairs, all filled with familiar faces pretending to be impartial. I walked in uninvited, tailored charcoal suit, hair slicked back like a blade. Robert Voss Sr. looked up first. Clara, he said, his voice a command disguised as concern. You weren't scheduled. I'm not here for permission, I said. I'm here for recognition. I placed the photograph and the flash drive on the polished table. The faint click of plastic against glass carried more weight than any shouted accusation. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Verena's manicured hand stopped mid-gesture. I let the silence bloom until it hurt. I am the rightful shareholder, I said clearly. And I'm here to review the contract you pretended could revoke me. No one moved. Not even a cough. I quoted, steady as law, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. I demand access to all records, a full audit, and a seat on the board. Robert's lips thinned. Nathaniel started to speak, but I raised a hand. Don't bother explaining what you signed. I already watched it. The assistant near the corner stared down at her notepad, pen trembling. If your family's boardroom was your battlefield, would you choose diplomacy or demand your seat? When I walked out, the marble floors felt different, like the building itself had shifted weight. The receptionists watched me, eyes flicking from my face to their phones. I could almost feel my name crawling back into their databases. Lucien was waiting outside, leaning against the car, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He handed me a tablet. You did it, he said simply. On the screen, the company's stock chart dipped. Investors were unsettled. The media had begun to whisper. I didn't raise my voice, I said quietly. You didn't need to. Inside, I was calm. Not triumphant. Just aware. They wanted a silent servant, I said, eyes on the tablet. They got a silent storm. He smiled faintly. And storms change landscapes. As we walked toward the car, my phone buzzed. A text from Jade Moreno. They know you're back. And they're preparing for you. I looked up at the building one more time, the Voss Dominion logo gleaming against the night sky like a crown built from stolen gold. Let them prepare. Rain drummed against the windshield like a heartbeat that refused to steady. Lucien drove in silence, headlights cutting through the fog that wrapped around the Crow estate. The road twisted upward, lined with trees that looked more like witnesses than scenery. "There are things about your father you should see before you burn the rest of it down," Lucien said finally, his voice low but edged. I turned toward the window. The mansion loomed ahead, gray stone, half-lit, half-forgotten. Once, it was the center of every gala and political deal in Ravenshore. Now, it looked like a mausoleum pretending to be a home. A guard at the gate recognized Lucien's car. He didn't even check the ID. "She's expecting you," he muttered, as though the words themselves might summon ghosts. Expecting me? Or the ghosts they thought they buried? The tires hissed across wet gravel as we pulled into the circular drive. The front doors opened before we reached them. A nervous assistant waited inside, eyes darting between Lucien and me. "Ms. Crow is in the old studio," he said, voice trembling slightly. The hallway smelled of cedar and old perfume. Portraits lined the walls, Crow ancestors, smiling with the same polished deceit. My heels clicked on the marble, echoing down corridors that felt narrower with every step. "Would you walk into the same house where your name was erased, just to hear what they kept hidden?" The studio was dim, lit only by a single chandelier. Verena stood beneath it, dressed in black like mourning made elegant. Her hair was pinned high, her smile faint but deliberate. "You wanted the truth?" she said softly. "Press play." She gestured toward a screen in the corner, the kind used for private viewings. Lucien moved to the back of the room as I stepped closer. My fingers hovered over the remote before I pressed the button. The footage crackled to life, a grainy home recording from decades ago. My father, Richard Voss, younger but just as commanding, stood across from Verena. His face was lined with fury. "You framed me," he said. "This deal will destroy everything we built." Verena, younger and colder, didn't flinch. "You signed it, Richard." "I just made sure it stayed signed." From somewhere off-screen, my mother's voice trembled. "Please stop. Both of you." The argument blurred into chaos, papers thrown, a door slamming, the camera tumbling sideways. And then a gunshot. The screen went black. I felt my knees weaken. My hand gripped the table just to stay upright. Verena's voice cut through the silence. "He didn't kill himself, Clara. He was meant to disappear." I turned slowly, my throat tight. "Who ordered it?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Ask your brother." The words fell heavy between us. Lucien didn't speak. The chandelier swayed slightly above, light scattering across the polished floor like fractured memory. When we left, the rain had slowed but the air felt heavier. My phone buzzed in my lap before we even reached the gate, Renee Adler's name lighting the screen. "Clara," she said the moment I answered. "I found something in the legal archives. Sealed documents, your father's final audio deposition." Lucien pulled over to the side of the road. I opened the file. Static hissed, then my father's voice filled the car. "If anything happens to me, Nathaniel is under Verena's control. Protect Clara. She has the mind I never had the courage to use." The recording ended abruptly. Lucien's hands tightened around the wheel. They silenced him before this could surface. I stared out at the fog. "Then we unseal it publicly." "Clara," Renee warned, "if you do that, the entire Dominion Empire collapses." "Good," I said. By the time we reached my apartment, the rain had stopped, but the silence lingered. A box sat waiting by the door. Lucien must have arranged its delivery. Inside, folded neatly beneath tissue paper, was my mother's wedding gown. The silk had yellowed slightly, but it still carried the scent of rose water in memory. Beneath the fabric lay a small envelope addressed in her handwriting, "For when the world forgets your name." Inside was a pocket-sized voice recorder, the same model I'd just seen in my father's video. My hands shook as I pressed play. Her voice emerged, soft, steady. "They'll come for you, Clara. When they do, make them remember who you are." I stood before the mirror, still wearing the gown. My reflection looked blurred, the lace catching the faint light. The weight of history pressed against my chest, but beneath it, something new was taking shape. They buried my story under their wealth. I'll exhume it with truth. My phone buzzed again. An anonymous number. A single line appeared on the screen, "The footage is already out." My phone was vibrating before sunrise. A hurricane of notifications scrolled endlessly across the screen, news headlines, missed calls, texts from unknown numbers. Footage of Voss family conspiracy goes viral. I blinked against the screen's glare. My father's voice, calm, damning, played in loops across every channel. The world had cracked open while I was asleep. Renee messaged, "They're hunting you in the press now." Verena already called it fake. Still wearing my mother's wedding gown from the night before, I sat on the floor, clutching the fabric like armor. It smelled of lavender and a life stolen. My chest was tight, but not from fear. From momentum. If the truth became ammunition, would you let it blow everything up, or take aim yourself? Lucien entered quietly, tossing a folder onto the coffee table. "If you're going to war," he said, "you need your own network." I opened it, a contract with Kane Media Syndicate. My name at the top, bold as hell. I signed without blinking. Hours later, I sat under the hot lights of Dana Carlisle's primetime set. She was known for grilling senators, CEOs, anyone arrogant enough to think they could outtalk her. I met her gaze. "Why speak now?" she asked. I turned toward the lens. "Because silence almost killed my father." Gasps off camera. Dana shifted in her seat. "You're saying the Voss family conspired to remove you, legally and otherwise?" "I'm saying the records don't lie. And neither does the audio deposition you all heard this morning." I leaned forward. Board minutes were altered. Dominion Holdings scrubbed my name, and then sold the lie to investors. Dana blinked. The control room went quiet. I quoted Maya Angelou, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." Dana straightened. "Are you afraid of what comes next?" "Afraid?" I paused. "No. But I'm ready." That was the quote that lit social media on fire. Hashtags exploded, "Clara Voss returns Voss truth." But the counter-strike was brutal and fast. By late afternoon, Dominion's PR machine flooded the airwaves. Olivia Crow, sleek and smiling, labeled me a bitter ex-fiancée of Lucien Draven, exploiting a personal tragedy for relevance. Then came the legal play. Verena filed an injunction against the footage, calling it deepfake manipulation. Lucien tossed his phone across the room. "They're moving fast. Too fast." Renee called, voice sharp. "They've wired money to 3 federal judges. Verena's trying to buy silence at the bench." I stepped outside Dominion Tower just before sunset. Dozens of cameras turned to me like sunflowers to light. "They want to dig dirt," I told them. "Let them dig. We'll burn their shovels." The surge inside me wasn't fear, it was clarity. Lucien introduced me to Everett Kane, a former journalist turned political arsonist. The man had eyes like razors and a smile that could sell fire to the sun. "You want to win this?" he said. "Start telling your story on your terms." That night, we launched a podcast called Resurrecting Clara. The first episode, The Ghost of Richard Voss. My voice cracked in the first 10 seconds. But then it leveled. This isn't a revenge story, I said. It's a resurrection. We ended the recording at midnight. Lucien left quietly. I sat alone in my apartment, phone on silent, until it lit up again. Unknown number. One line. If you don't stop, next time we leak something of yours. The ballroom pulsed with candlelight and power. Every surface shimmered, from the champagne flutes to the polished floor beneath Nathaniel and Verena as they stood at the altar. Their vows had just begun. A photographer crouched low for the perfect shot. The orchestra dipped into a swelling romantic prelude. I entered through the side doors. My heels clicked against the marble like a metronome. Lucien was near the back, his face unreadable, arms crossed. He gave the smallest nod. I took a breath and pressed the button on my phone. Behind the stage, the towering LED screen flickered. Then it came alive with video, grainy but real. Internal audit footage. Wire transfers. Contracts signed in hidden boardrooms. A document with Verena's signature at the bottom, coordinating shell company deals that bled Voss Dominion dry from the inside. Gasps broke out across the crowd. Forks clattered. Verena froze mid-vow. Nathaniel's hand tightened around the ring, his eyes scanning the crowd like a trapped animal. Robert Voss Sr. stood slowly, pale as the candles. I walked forward, past stunned faces. Lifted the microphone. I came here as the erased daughter, I said, calm and clear. Tonight, I'm the reckoning. Would you pull the lever if it meant bringing down the legacy that buried you? The crowd moved like water boiling over. Security rushed in. Photographers swarmed. Investors pulled out their phones, already dialing attorneys. Lucien stepped to the stage, guarding my flank. Verena tried to speak. Her mouth moved, but the noise drowned her out. I looked out and caught Evelyn Voss's gaze across the room. She didn't blink. Her face was all the answers I'd ever need: shame, fear, and a realization too late. A guest list display flashed red, every name tied to Voss Dominion now read under investigation. Into the mic, I said, when the system's rigged, the only real crime is silence. Before the crowd could absorb that, the screen changed again. Verena, in handcuffs, being led away. And then, my name. Clara Voss, initiator of hostile takeover proceedings. Gasps turned to confusion. Then panic. Every guest received a broadcast on their phones: Clara Voss initiates hostile takeover of Voss Dominion. Statement pending. Nathaniel jumped to his feet, face red, mouth moving, but security held him back. His mic had been killed. Lucien was already pulling me behind a velvet curtain as Verena, ever the tactician, played her last card. She'd activated legal injunctions midstream, causing media systems to shut down, firewalls to spike, investor lines to freeze. For a moment, time slowed. But I didn't falter. I wasn't here to survive the storm. I was the storm. Have you ever thought you were winning, only to feel the rules changing right under your feet? That's what this was. A final twist. But I had one more breath left. The guests were gone now. Silence hung like smoke in the aftermath. I stood alone on the balcony, the lake beneath reflecting shattered chandeliers from inside. Lucien appeared beside me, face softened in the nightlight. You did it, he said. No, I replied. We did it. My phone buzzed. It was Jade. It's live everywhere. They know you're not stopping. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I pulled my shawl tight. Looked at the water. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. I reached into my clutch, took out the mic I'd spoken into, wiped it clean, and slipped it away. The next move? No one would see it coming. And in the silent echo of the ballroom, I heard the countdown begin. Lucien's terrace overlooked Ravenshore like a constellation trapped beneath glass. Midnight hummed against the skyline, quiet but alive. He stood by the railing, 2 glasses of scotch already poured. I joined him, wordless, still feeling the pulse of last night's chaos thudding beneath my skin. He handed me a glass. "You were the storm," he said simply. "Now what do you want?" The question lingered, soft but sharp. I looked out at the city's reflection, fractured by rain. "Not vengeance," I said. "Peace. But on my terms." The words surprised even me. They felt heavier than victory, closer to truth. I told him about the night I watched my father's empire fall, champagne laughter echoing around men who toasted his downfall. I'd stood behind the curtains, 14 and silent. "That night," I said, "they taught me that silence is currency." Lucien studied me, expression unreadable. I set my glass down. "You may shoot me with your words," I murmured, quoting Angelou, "but still, like dust, I'll rise." He nodded once, quiet respect in the gesture. Have you ever stood on the edge of your pain and decided to step forward anyway? That's what it felt like, to breathe without burning. When I looked up, I realized Lucien wasn't offering partnership anymore. He was offering something more dangerous, faith. Morning came slow, gray, and cold. I drove to the old family lake house, the one place untouched by Dominion contracts and Crow signatures. The dock stretched out like an old scar, weathered but holding. The plaque still hung over the door, Voss family legacy. I brushed a thumb across it, each letter worn but stubborn. They'd branded me with silence. I would answer with sound. Inside, dust floated in the thin light. I opened the old box that once held my mother's gown and took out the voice recorder. Her message played again, her voice soft as prayer, "Protect Clara." But this time, I heard something different, resolve. Maybe she hadn't been warning me to hide. Maybe she'd been telling me to wait until I was ready. I gathered the files, the audit footage, the contracts, the deposition. All of it. I built a single dossier, titled Reclamation. Then I attached it to an encrypted email addressed to a handful of investigative journalists I trusted more than the courts. My finger hovered over send. I thought, what if the one who told me to disappear actually knew what I would become? Click. Sent. When someone erases your name, do you rebuild quietly, or write it back in bold, unmissable letters? The wind picked up outside, rattling the old shutters. I smiled. I wasn't rebuilding, I was rewriting. By afternoon, I was back at Lucien's penthouse. He stood by the window, city lights casting sharp lines across his suit. "I thought you'd left," he said. "I had to finish something first." He turned, holding out a document embossed with the Dominion seal. "Then it's only right you sign this." My eyes narrowed. "What is it?" "Your seat," he said. "Executive authority. You've earned it." I stared at the line waiting for my signature. My name, Clara Voss, looked foreign and familiar at once. I signed, slow and deliberate. The pen left a mark that felt like thunder in reverse, quiet, deep, irreversible. "I didn't come here to take revenge," I said. "I came to take what they denied, and then I came to walk away." Lucien smiled, almost tender. "And when you walk, they'll watch. Have you ever reached the moment when taking control meant finally letting go? I stepped toward the door, and my phone buzzed. Verina's face flashed across the screen. Her message was simple: you may win the board, but you'll lose the war. I didn't reply. At dawn, I returned to the lake house. Snow glazed the dock in fragile light. I walked to the edge where the ice met the shore. The world was still, holding its breath. I lifted the recorder and whispered, "This is not the end. It's the beginning." Then I placed it under the windshield of an old car I'd kept hidden there and drove away, leaving the message behind like a seed. They made me invisible. Now I choose when to appear. At the edge of the road, I stopped, the sunrise staining the trees in gold. Peace didn't sound like silence, it sounded like choice. What would you rebuild if you had the chance to start where you were meant to end? Tell me below. I'll read every word. Just as I turned the key, my wrist buzzed. A new text appeared, "Time's up. Are you still sure you want to walk away?" The lake house stood exactly as I remembered it, still, dignified, quietly holding its breath. Dawn hadn't quite broken, but a soft wash of pink pushed over the icy water like forgiveness. I parked by the old maple tree and stepped out. The air held that brittle hush of early morning, where even footsteps feel like apologies. Unlocking the front door was like opening a time capsule. The scent of old wood, dust, and something like second-hand hope filled my chest. I touched the edge of the doorframe, then let my hand drift to the plaque nailed beside it, "Voss Family Legacy." Still there. Still smug. I walked through each room slowly. The hallway where I once danced in socks. The den where I'd watched my father fall asleep, pen in hand. Memories whispered from corners, not asking to be relived, just acknowledged. They built their power here, I murmured, brushing my fingers across a faded family portrait. I'm going to rebuild my peace. In the small suitcase I'd brought from Lucien's penthouse was the box I never let out of sight, my mother's wedding gown, the voice recorder, and one photograph, my father, young and smiling, arms slung casually around me before the world turned cold. Have you ever returned to the place you thought you escaped, and found the key to rebuild instead of relive? I sat at the writing desk by the lake-facing window, the kind my mother always said gave the best light for hard truths. I pulled the recorder close, let the gown rest over my lap like a memory I was finally strong enough to hold. My name is Clara Voss, I said, pressing the record button. I told the story, mine, not theirs. The erasure, the staged betrayals, the calculated silences. The masked violence dressed in legacy. The day I stopped watching and started acting. My voice wavered once, then steadied. I quoted Eleanor Roosevelt, "Nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent." I attached the audio to a live feed. Then uploaded the full dossier, Verina's signature, Nathaniel's forged amendments, the contracts, the accounts, the surveillance. The lake house radio kicked on by itself, dusty wires, old mechanics. Maybe a glitch. Maybe something else. Even ghosts have ears. I leaned back, listening to my own breath against the silence, and for the first time, I didn't feel hunted. I felt heard. Outside on the icy deck, the sun was higher. I wrapped the gown around my shoulders like armor spun from memory. The lake shimmered, frozen but catching light. I thought of children I hadn't had yet. Of names I might one day whisper to them with pride. I emailed Lucien and Renee, "I'm ready for the next chapter, not just for me, but for what comes after." Lucien FaceTimed immediately. "You've changed the game." "No," I said. "I changed the board." I stood straighter then, the gown tugging gently in the wind. No more silence. No more being erased. I'm the author now. What legacy will you leave when you reclaim your name? I stepped into my car and pulled out slowly from the driveway. No bitterness. No backward glance. Only the feeling of something complete. The final text still lingered on my phone screen. Time's up. Are you still sure you want to walk away? I didn't reply. I deleted it. I thought of my mother again. They'll come for you. I whispered, then let them find me moving forward. The house receded in the rearview. The road ahead curved into sunlight. And for the first time in years, I wasn't running from anything. I was driving toward someone I hadn't met yet. The woman I would become. The sun barely broke through the overcast sky as I stood on the edge of the old Ravenshore cemetery, a place I hadn't returned to since the funeral they didn't invite me to. The headstone still bore his name, Richard Voss, but the inscription read like a lie. Beloved husband. Trusted visionary. There was nothing about betrayal. Nothing about silence. I clutched the recorder I'd used in the lake house. Its weight felt heavier now. Lucien stood several steps behind, giving me space. Even he didn't know what I'd decided to do next. I pressed play, not for the world this time, but for myself. My father's voice whispered through the static, "Protect Clara." I did. But now, I had to protect something more, truth without vengeance. Legacy without rot. They made oaths in dark rooms. I would answer them in daylight. The first light of morning spilled across the lake like a quiet forgiveness. I opened my eyes slowly, still curled beneath the throw blanket on the old daybed in the lake house. The recorder sat on the nightstand, silent now. Beside it, the wedding gown folded neatly back into its box, no longer burdened with ghosts. I walked out to the porch, barefoot on the chilled wood, and let the pale sunlight warm my face. For years, this was the place where I felt erased, like a ghost in a house built by someone else's hand. Now, it felt different, not haunted, but waiting. As though the walls themselves had been holding their breath for this moment. They erased my name, I whispered into the wind. I reclaimed my voice. The lake shimmered like it was listening. Have you ever returned to a place that defined your past, only to rename it with your future? Inside, I placed the gown box carefully into the hallway closet and closed the door. Not as a hiding place, but a promise kept. On the desk sat the sealed envelope, Clara Voss, shareholder. Board member. Human being no longer for sale. I walked it down to the Ravenshore post office and dropped it into the early morning mail chute. The sound it made was soft, final, freeing. In my chest, I felt the hinge click on a door I hadn't opened in years. I drove back to the lake house and stood in the living room, facing the plaque that had always bothered me, Voss family legacy. I removed it gently, packed it in a cloth, and set it aside. I remembered what Maya Angelou said, reclaiming our story is the most powerful weapon we possess. If you've ever felt caught between who you were and who you want to be, what would you reclaim first? I sat back down at the Lakeview desk and pulled out my laptop. One by one, I finalized the launch documents for the foundation. The Hope and Richard Voss Foundation. Its mission was clear: rebuild what legacy tried to erase, restore identities and amplify voices long kept silent. Lucien's name lit up my screen. "You ready?" he asked. I looked at the water, still unsure. "We start now." Renee Adler had already signed on as lead legal counsel. Jade Moreno would coordinate the research division. I'd handpicked a board of misfits, survivors, whistleblowers, and thinkers, each one someone who had once been told you don't belong here. The Dominion board voted at 8:32 a.m. I became chairwoman by unanimous decision. The story hit the feeds by 9. I didn't celebrate with champagne or statements. I stood quietly, looking over the lake one final time. The ice had begun to crack, sunlight making little diamonds along the surface. What would you build if you had one name, one seat, one voice to shift the world? I loaded my few remaining things into the car. No ceremony. No speech. Just steady, grounded movement forward. I merged onto the highway with the windows down. The wind carried away any trace of what I used to carry like a stone in my chest. I glanced in the rearview mirror. No ghosts followed. The past was bound to the shoreline now, not to me. Thank you for trying to bury me, I said quietly. You forgot I was a seed. As the miles passed beneath me, a memory returned, my father's final words, left behind for no one but me, protect Clara. She has the mind I never used. I smiled. I am using it now. If you've ever been the one erased, rewrite your story. If you've ever been the one watching, join someone who remembers. The road curved ahead, endless and open. No maps. Just motion. And somewhere far ahead, past every lawsuit, every betrayal, every silence, was a destination where a name meant more than legacy. It meant justice.